Tomorrow you guys will be taking a test on adding and subtracting fractions. So before we do that, there's a few steps and terms or vocabulary that we have to go over to help us sort out what we need to do in order to add and what we need to do once we get our answer. So the first term we want to look at here is the term common denominator. So this question is asking which group of fractions shares a common denominator. Denominator is the bottom number, okay? So these fractions are written kind of sideways because when you type them, that's how you have to do it. But if we were to write them out like we would maybe normally see them, so if we were to write 1/5 this way, okay, this bottom number, the 5, is a denominator. That tells us how big our piece is. It's a fifth. And this top number, okay, is our numerator. It tells us how many pieces we have. So a common denominator means that denominators are the same, okay? So if we look at this, we have 1/5 and 3/7. So 5 and 7 would be our bottom number. Those are our denominators. Are they the same? The answer is no, okay? Over here, we have 2/8 and 2/5. So remember, these pieces are eighths, and these pieces are fifths. And by the way, eighths are smaller than fifths. So are these denominators the same? No, they are not. So these do not have common denominators either. So we're on to our last pair. This has a 9 on the bottom, and this has a 9 on the bottom. So these two fractions do have common denominators. Even though these ones don't, they can be changed so that they do. Okay? So how do you change a fraction so they have a common denominator? There's some steps here to help you figure out how to do it. So if you need to come back to this video to look at these steps to help you out at any point in time, please make sure you do it. And you can even pause it and read the steps to yourself. So you cannot add or subtract fractions unless they have a common denominator. How do you find a common denominator? Step 1. Find the LCM, the least common multiple of both denominators. So the two denominators we have are 2/7 and 2/3. So 7 and 3 are denominators. We need to find a number denominators share, and when we're finding a common denominator, we use multiples. So we're going to come over here. We're going to have to find the multiples of 7 and the multiples of 2. So let's see, until we find the first one that's the same. So 7 times 2 is 14, 7 times 3 is 21, 7 times 4 is 28, 7 times 5 is 35. Let's find a few of 3, because I could go on and on forever, but let's try some for 3. Let's go 3 times 2 is 6, 3 times 3 is 9, 3 times 4 is 12, 3 times 5 is 15. Did we find one that's the same yet? Oh goodness, not yet. Okay, 3 times 6 is 18, 3 times 7 is 21. Oh, there we go, 21. So 21 is going to be our least common multiple, which is going to make our least common denominator. So both of these fractions need to be changed so that they have a denominator of 21. Okay, now remember the important rule. Let's see what number 2 says here. Change both fractions using the LCM you found above. We call that the least common denominator, okay? So the important thing here is when you are changing a fraction, whatever you do to the bottom, you must do to the top. So what we need to do is we need to look here and see how did we make 7 into 21? So we ask ourselves 7 times what equals 21? So if you come over here, this will help you figure it out. 7 times 1, 2, 3. So we had to multiply 7 times 3 to make 21. Okay, now that's important that we write that because this is what's going to help us figure out what the numerator is, because both parts of the fraction have to change by the same amount. So we also have to multiply the top by 3. So that means that 2/7 is going to become 6/21. Now down here we need to do the same thing. How did we get from 3 to 21? Well, 3 times what is 21? I can come over here and I can say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So 3 times 7 is 21. So I'm going to go over here and do this. So since I multiplied the bottom by 7, I have to multiply the top by 7. So 2/3, oops, there's my 7, becomes 14 over 21. Now that I have fractions that have the same denominator and I have changed them, I can add them. All right. So what is the rule for making an equivalent fraction? All right. So if we go back on this page for a second, when I changed these two, what I did is I made an equivalent fraction with a denominator of 21. So these two fractions are actually the same amount, just using different size pieces. And these two fractions are actually the same amount, just using different size pieces. So I can make equivalent fractions by changing the top and the bottom number by the same amount. And you can only make equivalent fractions by multiplying or dividing. Okay, so to make an equivalent fraction, I have to divide or multiply the top and the bottom by the same number. So which of the following pairs are equivalent fractions? Here's how we're going to figure it out. We're going to look at the bottom number and say 4 times what equals 12, because 12 is bigger than 4. So 4 times 3. If this fraction is an equivalent fraction, then if we multiply the 3 times 3, just like we did the 4, it should equal 9. And 3 times 3 does equal 9. So this is an equivalent fraction. So that one works. Okay, so we're going to come over here. We have 1/5 equals 1/10. Right away, I know these are not equivalent fractions because the numerator is the same. And remember, when the denominator changes, the numerator has to change. So 5 times 2 is 10, but if you multiplied the top by 2, then the new numerator should be 2 and not 1. So this is not an equivalent fraction. Okay, we're going to go over here. We have 4/8 and 2/8. Oh, so this is getting smaller. So we had to divide. So, but wait a minute. This number is the same and this number is different. So this can't be an equivalent fraction because if the top number changes, the bottom number has to change. So that's not going to work. That's not right. Okay, let's look at our last one here. We're going from 20 to 10 and from 10 to 5. So to see if this is equivalent, we have to see if it's changing by the same amount. So 20 times nothing equals 10, but 20 divided by 2 equals 10. So if we divide the top by 2, does it equal 5? So 10 divided by 2 is 5. So yes, this is an equivalent fraction. All right. So when you are adding and subtracting, once you kind of go through all that work of making equivalent fractions and then you can add them or subtract them, you need to look at your answer. So it says when you find an answer, you should always make sure your answer is in simplest form. Okay? So here are some instructions. You make a fraction into simplest form when you divide the numerator and the denominator by the same number until they are as small as they can go. So the fraction that we're starting with is 6/24. So we want to put 6/24 into simplest form. So we go over here to step 1, find the GCF, greatest common factor, for the numerator and denominator. So I have to find the factors for 6 and 24 and figure out what the biggest one they share is. So here are my factors listed for 6 and 24. So here's all the ways I can make 6, and here's all the ways I can make 24. I'm looking for the largest factor they share. So each number is a factor, and the biggest one they share appears to be 6. So what that means is that I can divide both 6 and 24. So I'm going to go down here to step 2. Divide the numerator and denominator by the biggest number they share. So I'm going to divide both 6 and 24 by 6. So 6 divided by 6 is 1, and 24 divided by 6. Now the cool thing is if you go up here, if you look at your factors, you already know the answer. 24 divided by 6 is 4. It's the other number. So 6/24 is the same as 1/4. So this is 6/24 in simplest form. And I know that it's in simplest form because I have a numerator of 1. Okay, anytime I have a numerator of 1, my fraction's already in simplest form. All right, so that is all the things that you need to know to be able to add and subtract fractions. Now I'm going to have you guys try a problem of the day.